Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I understand that we have 30 minutes each to kick off the third summit and to share our concerns about the future with you. So I will start right away, maybe now. First, the introduction. I'm coming from the United Nations, but I'm not coming from peacekeeping, as you can imagine. Neither am I a bureaucrat, a typical UN bureaucrat. So what is the organization I'm representing? It is the technical or economic arm of the United Nations. We are in charge of the inland transport legal instruments. We have 57 of them for road, rail, inland water transport, intermodal transport, the traffic signs you see in the streets, or the tir carnet you can see. This is all what we manage from legal point of view. On the map, you can see the geographical coverage of these agreements. Dark green countries are the ones that signed up to the most of the UN conventions. So we have a goal to see more countries who sign up in dark green and no white ones. And as it has been very kindly mentioned, the vehicle regulation agreements are included among these agreements. But perhaps this table shows really what we do, because we work for sustainable development in the transportation area. And with that, we have this global approach and the regional implementation approach at the same time. Recently, we published a paper on transport for sustainable development in the UNECE region, where among several messages, there are two major messages, and what I would like to leave with you, particularly now that we are at the threshold of Rio +20, that sustainable development means far more than environmental protection. It means, and we have already heard things about it, access for individuals, access for societies. It means affordability for individuals, for societies. It means safety. It means also environmental issues, but also security. Security for us is the fifth paradigm or the fifth element of the periodic table, what is not included here, but in the end, as an afterthought, we decided to put it there. If you study the table later on, you will see that we have actually either a legal instrument or analytical work or some technical assistance programs, what has been carried out over the past 60 years, and the different intergovernmental bodies that discuss these things. So what we do, we reach out to the governments, and we try to ensure that there is good exchange of information between private and public representatives. With this, I would like to move to the first topic, what I decided to speak about tonight with you, and that is to introduce the thought that there is a limit to growth for transport in the old ways. I don't speak about economic growth, because I personally believe that economic growth has to continue. We had a discussion with Larry before this meeting today. And yes, it has to continue, but transport cannot continue to grow in the old ways. Why? If you look at the graph, you can see that international trade increased more than 500-fold since the 19th century. Definitely, that expansion is not likely to be absorbed in the future. And all this was made possible because of transportation, and all this is depending on transportation. So technological changes in transportation are making this freight boom possible. But surely not in the future as it was in the past, and surely not with 80% of freight on the roads as it is today in most of the European countries. The other concern, which asks how far we can still grow with the transportation, is about the fast growth of population. We all know, 31st of October, we had the 7th billion habitant of the Earth. Today I asked an OICA representative, now tell me how many motorized vehicles we have, because whatever statistics I look at, I receive different data, and it's difficult to know now how many motorized vehicles, trucks, and I don't mean, you know, a tricyclet with a little engine. Well, he said, you are safe if you say 1 billion. Now, I don't know, so if you tell me later on, I would love to have a real figure, although they say that they are not sure about that either. Well, can it grow further, or should we see some new ways of using the vehicles, some new ways for mobility? Because there is a growing need for mobility, but the past ways of serving this mobility need definitely will not be possible. Not only physical constraints, because there are physical constraints, particularly in cities, but there are sustainability demands. Shift from transport to mobility should be a new way of thinking. Shift from ownership of a vehicle to getting where I want in a comfortable and safe way should be a new paradigm, and it should be definitely safe. It should be climate neutral. It should minimize local pollution. And at the same time, it must be efficient time and money-wise, and it should contribute to the economic development and competitiveness of countries. Now, this is quite a challenge. And how, and how this challenge can actually be achieved, well, there are different speculations. One speculation could be technological solutions. Technological solutions that bring new technologies, or that just start using the already existing technologies. So let's speculate a little bit. If we speak about city logistics, why can't we think more about cargo metros? I continue to be fascinated. You might have heard, some of you might have heard me speaking about it, but I continue to be fascinated about these experimental projects in Switzerland and in Germany. As far as I know, they are only laboratory ideas. But why not? We could have cargo metros, maybe too expensive. Or more innovative infrastructure, which meets the demand of people much more, where you have got street lamps, where you force people to move around. These piano stairs, this picture is from Stockholm, where they had a congestion at the exit of the metro because everybody wanted to use the escalator. So what they did, they introduced this, installed this piano stair, which really plays you some tunes as you move up. And now nobody wants to use the escalator. Everybody wants to climb the stairs. So great idea. Bicycles. I am very much afraid having bicycles and motorized transport messed up together. So I really welcome when there are some initiatives for bicycle lanes totally separated from motorized transport. Yes, and that's mobility. We don't have to get into a car all the time. With Larry, we were in a panel at Leipzig where we heard a fantastic presentation about this Seoul intervention, not to reconstruct or rebuild a highway, but to open it up for the inhabitants and to have an area where they can meet. If I remember well, the name of this creek is Chenga. This is fantastic. I still don't know where they have managed to have the traffic, because definitely the traffic was diverted somewhere, so that I still don't know. Then the other thing, to combine transport and energy or electricity generation, a Barcelona experience, why not? So there are lots of new ideas. I understand the European Union is already thinking about making it possible to fly in cities, which is an old dream of mine. I remember 30 years ago when I saw an invention of the flying chair that you get out from your room through the window and you go to your friend. Why not? So, of course, there are lots of ideas. But some of the ideas, for example, electric vehicles, are already here. Still, we don't have an agreement about the plugs. Some other ideas are already here, intelligent transport systems. But still, we have so many issues for interoperability, for harmonization of technical standards which don't exist, et cetera, and I will speak about that more, that it cannot be deployed as fast as it should be, although ITS could offer a lot of solutions to the questions. So, what UNECE is doing to help answering all these demand questions, the questions how to push the limits of growth for transport and put this growth onto a new track if we can agree that the past way is no longer the future way. Well, one of our projects is the FISITA. This is for Future Inland Transport Systems. It is a CO2 reduction project. It is global. For 3 years, it is the first year, we are working with all the regional commissions, with the other 4 regional commissions of the UN, and with all the governments of the world. During this project, what we try to do, to identify which government has a strategy to reduce CO2 through inland transport, and if they have, what is it, and how do they know how much CO2 their transport generates. Second, so we will have a status report. Second, we develop a model, an easy model, simple model, that governments can use to measure the CO2 by their inland transport so that they would have an idea about the situation in their country. And that will be connected with a transport policy converter, which will offer solutions for interventions. We all know that there are some best solutions, but they are politically not feasible. For example, increasing the costs too much of road mobility. So we have to think of the second best and the third best options as well, so that everybody would buy into that and at least start moving into the direction of addressing the CO2 problem. Not yet. The next stage of this project will be a big international global conference, March or April, where we will share the concept note for the model and the status report with the participants, and we will ask the participants to tell how they see the future with less CO2 in inland transport. To some extent, even to vet the ideas about the model and the transport policy converter. So I would very much like to welcome you at that conference in the Palais des Nations in Geneva. Now, in addition to the forfeits, we have traditional activities, and many of you may know this Working Party 29, which is the World Harmonization Forum for Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations. And this forum is having its sessions this week. According to this forum, already a lot of improvement can be achieved by 2015. Actually, 30% increase of energy efficiency is feasible if all the new vehicles with the current combustion engine technology are put into the market. And much more can be achieved through getting a global market for environmentally friendly vehicles, and even more with electric vehicles. I wouldn't go more into that. The next item I would like to mention to you, and that is road safety. Jan has been at the UN Road Safety Collaboration this week, and yes, this is the decade of road safety to take actions. Now, to take actions means that all governments are expected to start addressing road safety and reducing fatalities, reducing road crashes. Each organization is expected to think how you can contribute to this, because we don't do what the governments do, but we help the governments. So from our perspective, we have 3 overarching goals. One is to ensure the widest possible geographical coverage of the legal instruments, because one has to start with the proper regulatory framework. For example, there is a UN agreement on periodic vehicle technical inspection of vehicles. Unfortunately, very few countries have signed up for this agreement, although this agreement contains only the bare minimum for environment and the bare minimum for safety. But the institutions have to be in place. The regulatory framework has to be in place. So that's one of the elements. The other element is to ensure that these agreements will be implemented, as well as some technical assistance will be organized targeting specific areas. Now, when I speak about specific areas, I will not go into details, but I would like to mention to you that it's a myriad of activities. We deal with tunnel safety. After the Mont Blanc fire, regulations on tunnel safety were developed. We deal with the level crossing, road rail level crossing issues, how to help to improve the safety level of level crossings. And most likely, we will have to address and modify the Vienna Conventions because of ITS. Because when we speak about traffic rules and road signs and traffic signs, there are two minimum issues that have to be addressed relatively fast. One, the harmonization of variable message signs, and the other one is the liability. According to the UN agreement, the driver has to be liable and has to be in control of the vehicle all the time. Now, with some of the new ITS solutions, it is not the case. And many governments are not eager to accept that. So I'm moving to the third item, and that is the intelligent transport systems. We have identified the intelligent transport systems and actually the use of information and communication technologies in transportation, and particularly in road transport, as the future, as the solution to many of the problems. And we wondered, what's the current situation, why ITS is not as much used as it could be. So we had an analysis, that is the background paper, then a strategic note that was up for public consultation on our website between January and June this year. And based on the public consultation, we developed a roadmap, what we can do. The strategic note identifies the gaps and stumbling blocks to ITS use, no matter who can solve it. Maybe it's not UNECE, maybe it's ITU with frequency allocation. It doesn't matter, we just identified problems. And so we identified our vision. We thought a lot and we thought, okay, vision number one, limits to growth in transport in the old ways. Number two, what we already witnessed, there is a convergence between transport and communication sectors, while the regulators are totally far apart from each other and they don't talk to each other. Third, the future inland transport should be shaped also by policymakers. Why do I say that? Because what we see that up till now, it is much more the bright technological innovations that drive the future, and regulators are either not even aware of these changes, or when they are aware, they don't really deal with them. So when we identified gaps, first there were much more, but then we grouped them into these gaps. One, what I have mentioned, for example, the liability constraint, but there are much more than that. For example, my old concern that the public sector and the private sector are so much apart, and that in the public sector, road management has not been reformed. Now, in some countries in Europe, we see the road operators, which are much more advanced, but in many countries of the world, or in the majority of the countries of the world, by the way, in Japan, there is huge progress as well. But in many countries of the world, what we see that road management, that road administration is not even in the baby steps. It's not properly designed. So without properly having them in place, it's not possible to absorb the new technologies. So that needs to be addressed as well. And that's why they have different speed in accepting and introducing new technologies. Harmonized policies, big problem. Interoperability, big problem. We can see it with the VMS as well, but even more. Today, as we had a discussion in the morning about, okay, what is the time frame to facilitate some harmonization? And are we going to deal with the vehicle-to-vehicle only, or with the vehicle-to-infrastructure harmonization as well? But what we see that in the different regions of the world, there are different strategies. In the United States, what we hear, the priority is to focus on the vehicle-to-vehicle because they feel that there is no possibility now to finance major infrastructure development. But in Japan, we see that there is a conscious approach when there is a new infrastructure to think already of the ITS solutions. Well, which way Europe will go? Why can't we see that there is a harmonized approach, a harmonized policy all over the world, because that will add to efficiencies. All these constraints have to be addressed. How fast one can solve them and how we can do them. We have identified 20 tasks for us, UNECE, and with those 20 tasks, we will not address all of the stumbling blocks. For example, there is one which was not even on that slide because that's the additional one, that is good governance. ITS needs good governance. ITS needs confidence in the authorities and confidence in the government. So good governance is not our task to deal with in transport, but some people like World Bank and some others have a role in that. And once they are more successful, we will be more successful in transport as well. Among these, this is the first 10, and then the next 10. Among these things, we have some sort of quickies. One of the quickie might be at least to see more about the VMS situation. Why? Because that issue we have started to address already, and next year we will have a major review of the different variable message signs, and in the working party number 1, that is the UN Road Safety Forum, it will be discussed. That will be the first modification of the Vienna Conventions, what we are considering. There are some longer-term issues, for example, the liability. Even longer-term issue definition. We don't have a common definition for ITS. One of the concerns is that intelligent transport systems could be the integrators between the modes. But what you see that there is lack of harmonization between countries, lack of harmonization between vehicle and infrastructure, and lack of harmonization between road and rail, road and inland transport, or road and intermodal transport. They all use different technologies, different systems. So how this integrator function could work better. To do that, how we are going to achieve it? We plan to do that through the different working parties on the one hand, but we need a common forum. So we have committed ourselves to have one policy dialogue with a concrete outcome, which will be either a modification to a UN regulatory framework or some other actions, so with a concrete outcome every year, one every year. It's not much, but at least something. So the first one, by the way, the first is planned to launch the strategic package. The first one will be next year in February, 28th of February in the afternoon, so you are all welcome to participate in it, where we will go through the major issues for ITS, and then the next one will be either December next year or February the following year. With big expectations on our side, but I believe on behalf of the industry as well. So any comments to this would be most welcome. There could be much more to say about what we do, but to keep the time frame, I would like to conclude with these two messages that we see that we are in a paradigm shift, and that is coming around. So not only the technology will be changing, but the regulators will be changing, the values will be changing, and they bring newer challenges, because we think the electric vehicle brings some solutions, yes, but it creates so many other problems about the safety of electric vehicle, or many other things. The second message is that in UNECE, in the transport division, we are very open for criticism and also for advice. So please, whenever you feel that we have to do something or we don't do something correctly, tell us, because then we can do a good job. Then we can address them in the proper way. So you are most welcome to be our stakeholder, one of our stakeholders as well, and contribute to the joint thinking. Thank you very much.